Hi, I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. I'm here today with Paul Connelly, Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer at HCA Healthcare, a Fortune 100 company and one of the nation's leading providers of healthcare services, comprised of 182 hospitals and 2,300 sites of care in 20 states and the United Kingdom. This interview is sponsored by KnowBe4, the world's largest security awareness training and simulated phishing platform that helps you manage the ongoing problem of social engineering. To learn more about KnowBe4, visit knowbe4.com. Paul, welcome. Great to have you back with us again.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So, Paul, you're presently the CSO for a Fortune 100 healthcare provider that serves tens of millions of patients a year. You're one of the few people who, every time you're on, I ask you to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background because it's so worthy to listen to you. I know you were the first ever information security officer at the White House. That was a role I believe you held for 8 years under 3 presidents. So tell us about that and your background.
Well, thank you. I'll be the first to admit I've just had a very fortunate career and been able to work for some great organizations that really support this work. So I count myself as extremely lucky. But out of college, I had an opportunity to work at the National Security Agency, which is another great organization. And I was part of an assessment team that studied the security of White House systems, kind of the national security side of the White House, and had a bunch of recommendations. And one of them was that they needed to start a program and have somebody in charge. And the CISO title didn't even exist back then. They called it the ISO, Information Security Officer. So I was detailed as from NSA on a 2-year assignment to build it up, get things going. And part of my job was to help lead a process where they would choose my successor and someone who would permanently be in the role because I was still a fairly junior person. And they went through all these interviews and came back to me and said, we don't like anybody as much as we like you. And so they offered me the opportunity to stay. So I ended up staying there actually 9 years and worked under Presidents Reagan, Bush, and Clinton. And as you can imagine, it was an incredible experience. Every single time I walked through those big iron gates onto the 18 acres, I felt a chill and had the opportunity to interact with incredible people and senior leaders of the country, excuse me, travel all over the country, did a bit of world travel in that role as well. Plus the big thing, just getting a chance to build a program from the ground up. It was just an extraordinary experience that's carried forward. Lessons learned have carried forward through my whole career.
So, Paul, we recently put out our top 5 cybersecurity facts, figures, predictions, and statistics. It's one thing to, look at the market from our perspective. We talk to a lot of people. We do our best. It's not an easy job, but getting, some firsthand feedback from people who are on the front lines, who are running security organizations at large enterprises really helps us put things in perspective. So I'd like to just run some of these by you and get your feedback. And we're going to start off with cybercrime, the damages that cybercrime is costing the world. We estimate that at $7 trillion globally in 2022. And if it was an economy, it would be the world's 3rd largest behind the US and China. I mean, we're just talking about a massive amount of money, and the monetary losses are so great that I don't think that 7 trillion matters. I think we can just say, it's an enormous number. Do you view it that way? When you look at, cybercrime and what it's doing, you've, had a career spanning decades where you've been responsible for security. Is it really causing that much damage?
It sure seems to be. It's incredible, and the number of ways that you can get hit as an organization, and the way that the dollars add up. I'm not surprised at all by those numbers that you're saying, and I know from my organization's perspective, the amount that we're investing to try to counter that is growing at the double digit range as well. So that all seems to make sense.
I look at our market, Paul. I got started in the IT industry back in the early '80s, and at that time, cybersecurity wasn't a word. I'm not even sure that info security was all that popular. We did what we needed to do to secure systems, and the cybersecurity market, if you want to call it that, looking back, or the amount of money being spent on cyber was not even measurable. And then you go even back to 2015, we're talking about a market that was maybe $3.5 billion. Today we're looking ahead and, we're seeing a $1 trillion industry unfold. We're seeing thousands and thousands of cybersecurity companies and startups last year raised several $billion. So when you look at this market, how do you see it? How does it compare to what you saw when you were first responsible for security?
Oh, you're right. I was right there with you back in the 80s when this getting started in this. It's incredible how it has grown, and the number of startups, the number of brilliant ideas. It's sort of like supply and demand. You have this demand for better cybersecurity, so people, instead of inventing other things, are putting their attention on inventing great new ways to protect yourself. So it's a good thing, and as we all know, this has become a board level issue for companies, and there are all ranges of companies that need all different kinds of help. So I can definitely see how it's growing at that pace, and I don't see any slow up either. I mean, you hear discussions about consolidation and so forth, but I'm not sure that that changes the amount that needs to be invested going forward.
So I'm curious, how do senior executives like yourself at really large organizations with just so much on your plate, how do you keep up with the market? Where do you find the time, and what are your sources? Do you personally go out to events? Do you have people go for you who give you feedback? Do you personally read a lot of material?
It's a little bit of all of that, and you're right. It's overwhelming. I bet between phone calls and emails and even text messages, LinkedIn. I mean, every single day I probably get at least 50 companies that are reaching out to me, and there's just no way. No matter how good the value proposition is, there's just no way I can spend the time looking at that when I'm trying to run an organization. So I'm fortunate because of the scale of my company that I do have some people on my team who really focus on looking at new technology. But we do depend on outside groups as well. We depend on sharing war stories with our peer organizations and find out what other healthcare companies and financial services and other industries are doing as well. And we depend a lot on that. But it is a challenge because there's so many good ideas, and every one of them, the company thinks that they absolutely could solve a problem for us, but we've got to figure out how is it going to fit in with everything else that we have going on.
Now, do you think money's being spent in the right areas? There's a lot of money being spent, but is it being spent in the right areas? When you look at companies, whether they're in your space, in the healthcare space, and I think a lot of this question applies to smaller, less structured organizations who don't have the resources, and they do go largely on what they read, what they hear from other people. And as you know, there's just so much to protect, so many areas you can invest in, everything from training employees to protecting endpoints and everything in between.
It can really be an overwhelming challenge, and it comes back to the leader of the program and their business leaders focusing in on what are the most important risks, and if you've got a dollar to spend, where are you going to invest it where you can make the biggest difference on that risk.
So I want to pivot here and talk to you about the people side of the business, not so much the technology, but the cyber fighters themselves. And we've touched on this with you before, so not to be too redundant, but I think it's important, and different people will watch different interviews that we produce. Recruiting people, and just as important, or maybe even more important, retaining people. What is that like for you, Paul, and for your peers? And I'm especially interested in retention. Once you have somebody and you've groomed them and they're experienced and they're good at what they do, it's a very competitive market. There's a lot of unfilled positions out there. Recruiters are very aggressive. What are the best practices for keeping the best people?
It's a big challenge that we all share. As we discussed earlier, that there's a lot of good things in terms of recruiting side that I feel like we're starting to see the advantage or the benefits of some of the programs to get people into cybersecurity earlier. And we've also changed our focus. 10 years ago, we would not even look at somebody if they didn't have 5 years of experience. Today, we're looking at people for internships that will lead right into full-time jobs when they graduate from college and things like that. So we've adjusted and we're building up more of a ladder of growth for people. And I think that then feeds into the retention because people in this field know that there's lots of opportunity out there. So in addition to being a cybersecurity leader, you've got to be a people leader and you've got to create an environment where people want to work. You've got to provide opportunities to grow and tackle new challenges and expand their capabilities and do all those things that make people want to stay. And as I've mentioned to you in the past, I do think that uh, healthcare is lucky that we're kind of a noble cause where people are passionate about being part of an organization that's taking care of people. So that gives us maybe a little bit of a retention advantage in some cases. But you've got to provide people that full package of opportunity, care as a manager, working in an organization and a culture that they want to be in.
And the exact opposite of those types of people would be the malicious actors out there, ransomware authors who are targeting healthcare organizations and show no mercy. We do a lot of research on ransomware, but when I think back to the 80s and there was no ransomware, and in the 90s, I'm trying to remember when we saw it for the first time. And when you saw it for the first time, Paul, did you ever expect that it would become an economy, that it would become such a huge risk to society?
No, it's unbelievable how it's evolved, isn't it? I can remember when it was just kind of an annoyance where maybe somebody would get an email that had an attachment and they'd get fooled into clicking on the link and it would encrypt their device. So the worst case scenario is you would lose whatever was on that device, or maybe you pay $200 to get the key. So to think how it's evolved into something that is such a serious threat, and it really for us, it's all about the threat to operations and the threat to the trust of our patients if their personal information were to be disclosed. So it's become a huge business risk, and as we've mentioned, it's a board level discussion. It's a CEO level discussion for companies, and it just seems like they continue to evolve. That it continues to get more and more serious.
I remember covering a story about a year and a half ago. There was a patient who was being rushed to a hospital in Dusseldorf, Germany, and that hospital was struck by ransomware. And unfortunately, they had to turn this patient away. And the patient, a woman, didn't survive. She didn't make it to the other hospital. And I'm not so sure that people realize how serious this is. I mean, we're talking about medical devices, we're talking about hospital beds. Everything is electronic, everything is connected to the internet. Do you worry about that? Do your peers worry about that?
Oh, absolutely. It's that's one of the big drivers behind the investments that we make is to not let ourselves fall into a situation like that. I think that case in Germany was the first one, and there was another one in Alabama after that. So it can happen, and people depend. Well, they depend on all kinds of things, but and my focus is healthcare, obviously. So people depend on hospitals to be there in their moment of need. So it's just a non-negotiable for us to allow something like that to happen.
Paul, before we let you go, and we really do appreciate your time. You've been so generous coming on with us a couple of times. Let's talk about humans and employees. How important is it to train all of the people in an organization on security? And how much of a gain is there when you do that and you have a good security awareness training program in place?
I think it's absolutely critical. And when I talk to my peer CISOs at other organizations, I always ask how much of your organizational effort are you focusing in this area? Because I think it's a huge part of a program, and it's easy to kind of fall into uh, not I hate to say trap, but fall into a way where all you're thinking about is technology and getting the latest technology. You've got this huge workforce out there, and any one of those people could do something, even with the best of intentions, they can make a mistake that triggers a major event for your organization. So you've got to deputize each one of them as part of your security program. And part of that is having a really good program that reaches out to them, um, connects with their personal lives is one approach that we've taken. We really focus our awareness on how to protect yourself and your family online, with the idea that they'll carry those good habits forward when they're at work. And the other thing that we say is we want to meet the people where they are. I mean, we've got doctors and nurses who are focused on caring for their patients. They don't have time to sit and watch an hour-long PowerPoint presentation. So for them, we're trying to hit small bits of information, quick videos that focus on one thing that they can take away. But using all the available media, using humor, having fun with it, gamification, all these different tools, I think you need to take everything that's at your disposal and throw it at this issue, because you've got to depend on your employees as part of your program.
I'm curious, are doctors and nurses receptive? I mean, we're talking about people who are saving lives every day and they're dealing directly with patient care. So it's crisis after crisis for them. And of course, there's the cyber crisis that you're dealing with. Do they pay attention? Are they receptive to that?
They are, and it's 100% better than it was 20 years ago when I first came into healthcare. And I think now it's because everybody recognizes that this is real. This can happen to them. I mean, it's barely a week that goes by that you don't see a story about, some hospital somewhere being hit by ransomware, and nobody wants to have that happen where they're working, and or have that happen to their patients. So while we try our best to stay out of their way and allow them to focus on caring for the patients, we do get their support in doing those things that we need to make sure that we're protecting ourselves.
Do we have a more cyber aware society now? When a brand new employee comes and joins your company, your organization, day one, have they perhaps already had some security awareness training, or, more sensitive to, say, what it looked like a decade ago?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think today is the best it's ever been in terms of just general security awareness across society. And a lot of it's because there's so much in the news. There's television shows about it. I mean, how many movies and shows have something to do with a hacker or some sort of cyber attack? So it's become part of the culture, which in a way is a good thing, because people are much more aware of it and they recognize that it's real. It's not just some esoteric threat that might happen to somebody else.
So I have a personal question, Paul, before we let you go. You've been at HCA for a while now. I mean, a lot of people know you. You're a thought leader. You've done such a great job there. But we see so much turnover in the CISO role, and we see this in large enterprises, mid-market companies, smaller companies where they actually have a CISO. Why is there so much turnover? Is it just such a difficult job, stressful? What do you make of that?
Well, first, thanks for your kind words. It's definitely a stressful job, and your success really depends on other people. And maybe that's part of the factors in turnover, is that people aren't getting the support they need. But um, I feel very fortunate that I've had a really good team, and I have great support from the leaders in my organization and my peers across the organization. So I've been here 20 years. So when you get into a situation like that where you've got that kind of support all around you, I think it's a job that you can stay in. But if you don't have those things, I can understand how it would really wear you down quickly.
We're going to have to do some research on those 20 years. I mean, you might be the longest standing, CISO or CSO, excuse me, who's served one organization. And if not, you're probably part of a tiny fraction.
Maybe so. I never imagined that I would last this long, candidly, when I started. But it's been great to be part of the evolution in this field. An exciting place to be. I can't imagine having a different career.
Paul, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to have you back on soon.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. This interview is sponsored by KnowBe4, the world's largest security awareness training and simulated phishing platform that helps you manage the ongoing problem of social engineering. To learn more about KnowBe4, visit knowbe4.com. You can keep up with all of our media at cybercrimemagazine.com.